not that I don't want you here. It's something about the way you stare into my eyes. I know that I don't make things clear. I fall for you every time I try.
Hey guys, you're welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. In this video I'll be teaching you guys how to draft this corset blouse with basque waistline and deep yoke. So if you're interested, keep on watching and let's get started. I've already gone ahead to roll out my lines. So the distance from my shoulder to my bust point is 10 inches. The distance from my shoulder to my under bust point is 13 inches. The distance from my shoulder to my waistline is 16 inches. And the length of this half length depends on what you want to create. So if you want to create an inbuilt corset, you can go ahead and go down by 20 to 25 inches depending on how tall you are. I'll stop at the waistline for now. So on my shoulder line, I went ahead to take half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. I indicated that with a dot. On that dot, I went down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope and I slanted into the neckline area. After doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to take my neckline measurement. So for the depth, I'll be taking 3 inches, and for the width, I'll be taking 3 inches also. After doing that, I'll use my ruler to connect both points like this. The next thing I'll do is to get my chest line measurement. To do that, I'll place my tape like this and I'll go down by half of my round armhole measurement. Half of my round armhole measurement is 8 inches. So I'll mark the 8 inches like this and I'll rule a straight line across. Another way to get your chest line is to go up from your bust point by 2 inches. So whatever your bust line is, go up by 2 inches and to give you your chest line. I've gone ahead to rule a straight line across and I'll label it my chest line. After doing that, I'm going to place the same measurement that I have on my shoulder line, which is 8 inches. That is half of my shoulder measurement. I'll place the same measurement on my chest line and I'll indicate it with a dot. After doing that, I'm going to connect the dot on the shoulder slope to meet the dot on the chest line. I'll connect both dots into a straight line. The next thing I'll do is to place my tape on this straight line right here, and what I have is 7 inches. I'm going to divide the straight line into 2 equal halves. Half of 7 inches is 3.5 inches. I will indicate the 3.5 inches like this. On that 3.5 inches point, I'll go inward by half an inch. I'll also indicate the half an inch with a point. After doing that, I'm going to place my bust circumference divided by 4. I'll place it on my chest line and I will indicate the measurement with a dot. After doing that, I'm going to connect from the shoulder slope to meet the half an inch and from the half an inch to meet the dots that I have on the chest line like this. So guys, the next thing I'm going to do is to take my bust band measurement, which is half of my nipple to nipple measurement. Mine is 4 inches. I'm going to place the 4 inches on my waistline, on my under bust line and on my bust line. After doing that, I'm going to use my ruler to connect all the dots into a straight line. After connecting the dots, guys, the next thing I'm going to do is to take in my darts. So I'll take 1 inch on both sides of this straight line. I'm going to place my tape on the waistline and I'll mark 1 inch on the side front. I'll also place my tape on the center front and I'll also mark 1 inch. I repeat the same thing on the under bust line. I'll take 1 inch on both sides of this line. After doing that, I'll go ahead and connect into a straight line. Next thing I'll do is to place my tape on the shoulder line. So what I have left on the shoulder line after taking my neckline measurement is 5 inches. I'm going to divide it into 2. Half of 5 inches is 2.5 inches. I will indicate the 2.5 inches with my marker. After doing that, guys, I'm going to determine how opened I want the chest area to be. So you can decide to go up by 2 inches depending on what you want. But I'll be going up by 1.5 inches, upward by 1.5 inches from my chest line. I'll place the 1.5 inches like this and I'll use my pen to rule the 1.5 inches into a straight line. The next thing I'll do is to connect from the shoulder line to meet the dart leg on the bust line. So I'll place my tape like this and I'll connect straight down to meet the dart leg on the bust line. So guys, the next thing I'll do is to tighten my over bust. So I'm going to place my tape on this straight line, after the straight line, and I'll mark 1 inch on the center front. I'll also go ahead and mark 1 inch on the side front. After doing that, I'll determine how deep I want the yoke to be. So I'm going to go down from the under bust line by 1 inch. So it depends on how deep you want it to be. You can check the one on the thumbnail. You can see that it is very deep. So you can go down by 2 inches or 2.5 inches. You can stop at the under bust line. Okay, so I went down by 1 inch. What I'm going to do is to use my free hand to connect from the 1 inch to meet this dart leg. So I'm using my free hand to see what I can achieve. Then I'll use my marker to go over it. After carving out the yoke, guys, this is what I have. I'll go out by 1 inch. That is my dart that I took earlier. I went ahead to mark it again. I'm going to use my ruler to connect from the 1 inch dart to meet the bust point, just like you see me doing. After doing that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and use the curved part of my ruler to connect from the under bust line. Okay, so I'm trying to create one part of my corset cup. In case you don't understand, just look at what I am doing. Okay, so I went ahead to connect from the under bust to meet the bust line, and then I'll place the curved part of my ruler on the bust line and I'll connect from that point to meet the under bust. So we've created one part of our corset cup. The next thing I'll do is to place my tape on this tiny part that we have on this armhole area. What I have is 1 inch. I'll divide it by 2, which will give me half an inch. I'll indicate that with my marker. After doing that, I'm going to use my ruler to connect like this to meet the half an inch. So I'm just going to use my free hand like this. If you can use your ruler, go ahead and use it. I'll connect to meet the half an inch mark like this. After doing that, guys, next thing I'm going to do is to take the dart for this other side. So I marked 1 inch earlier. I'm going to connect from that 1 inch to meet the bust line like this. After doing that, guys, next thing I'm going to do is to create the other cup. I'll place my ruler on the under bust line, okay, and I'll connect from there to meet the bust line just like this. After doing that, I'm going to place my ruler on the armhole area, the half an inch that I marked on the armhole area, and I'll connect from that point to meet the under bust. So go ahead and place your ruler in such a way that there is space for your bust to sit, okay. The next thing I'll do is to go ahead and label my yoke, and then you're going to determine whether you want to do a basque waistline or you want to create an inbuilt corset. I'll be doing a basque waistline for this tutorial. So what I did was to place my tape on the waistline and I went down by 5 inches. After doing that, I ruled a straight line across the 5 inches mark. What I'm doing now is extending my dart leg to meet the 5 inches line. So after extending, the next thing I'll do is to start placing my measurements. I already have my bust circumference divided by 4 on the chest line. I went ahead to replace the 2 inches dart and I'm adding 2 inches as my stitching allowance. On the under bust line, I'll place my under bust circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart of 2 inches and I'll add 2 inches as my stitching allowance. On the waistline, I'll place my waist circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart and I'll add 2 inches as my stitching allowance. On the length of this pattern paper, which is going to serve as the basque waistline, I'm going to shape it later. So what I'll do is to place my hip circumference divided by 4. I'll replace the dart and I'll add my stitching allowance of 2 inches. To be on the safer side, that is why I'm placing my hip measurement. But if you don't want to do too much shaping, you can just place your waist circumference divided by 4, replace the dart and add your stitching allowance, okay. After doing that, I'll go ahead and connect the lines. So this is what I have, guys. Next thing I'll do is to go inward like this by 1 inch. After doing that, I'm going to place my ruler on the 5 inches line, and then I'll connect from that point to meet this 1 inch, just like you see me doing. So we've created the basque waistline. So when I'm cutting, I'm going to cut along this 1 inch mark. After doing that, I'll go ahead and cut. After cutting, guys, this is what I have. I'll label my center front and my side front so I don't get confused. And I also have my cup, center front and side front, and I have the yoke. After cutting, guys, this is what I have. The next thing I'm going to do is to join the center front and the side front together. Okay, so I want to cut out just one piece when I'm cutting on my fabric. And the reason why I'm joining this is because after cutting, you realize that in most cases you realize that the center front and the side front is not the same length. So I'm going to go ahead and use my tape to hold them together, just like you see me doing, and I'll go ahead and reshape it, okay, just so they align. So normally I take 4 inches for my basque waistline, but because of this adjustment I took 5 inches, so that after adjusting I'll be left with 4 inches. I hope you guys are not confused. So what I'll do is to place my ruler like this, and I'll connect like this. After adjusting, I'll go ahead and cut this part out. And yeah, that is all for the center front and the side front. So once you sew, you see that everything aligns. So we have the center front, the side front, and the two cups. The next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and draft out the back. For the back, guys, I've gone ahead to rule out my lines just like we did for the front. The only difference here is I didn't rule any line for the underbust because we'll not be needing that. So the distance from my shoulder to my chest line is 8 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my bust line is 10 inches. Distance from my shoulder to my waistline is 16 inches. On the shoulder line, I went ahead to take half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches. I took the same measurement on the chest line. I'll go ahead and connect the two dots into a straight line. After doing that, I'm going to go down on this straight line by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and I'll connect from that point into the neckline area. The next thing I'll do is to take my neckline measurement. For the depth, I'll be taking 1 inch, and for the width, I'll be taking 3 inches. Remember, we used 3 inches for the front neckline, so the width of the front and the back is supposed to be the same. And for the depth, I'll be taking 1 inch. After doing that, I'll use my roller to connect like this. So for this back pattern, I did not include my zipper allowance because I want to add loops to the back. If you want to add zipper, go ahead and add your zipper allowance. The next thing I did was to place my tape on this straight line right here, and I divided the 7 inches by 2. After doing that, I'll place my bust circumference divided by 4 on the chest line. I'll indicate it with a dot, and then I'll connect from this center point to meet the chest line like this. The next thing I'll do is to take in my dart, which is half of my nipple to nipple measurement. Mine is 4 inches. I'll place the 4 inches on the waistline, on the bust line, and then I'll place it on the chest line. After doing that, I'll connect the 3 dots into a straight line. The next thing I'll do is to take in my dart. I'll be taking half an inch on both sides of this straight line. I'll take half an inch on the center front and half an inch on the side front. After doing that, I'll go down by 1 inch on the chest line. I'll indicate that with a dot. I'll connect from the waistline to meet the 1 inch below the chest line like this. The next thing I'll do is to go down on this neck depth by 1 inch because I want to create an opening at the back of this blouse. After doing that, determine how wide you want the back to be. I'm going to use my ruler to connect from that dot to meet the dart leg. That is how wide I want the opening at the back to be. If you don't want an opening at the back of yours and you want a zipper, go ahead and add your zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. After doing that, guys, I'm going to, like I said earlier, I'll be fixing loop at the back of this blouse. That is why I did not add a zipper allowance. I'll go ahead and start placing my measurements. I already have my bust circumference divided by 4 on the chest line. I'll add 2 inches to that measurement for my stitching allowance. On the waistline, I'll place my waist circumference divided by 4 and I'll add 2 inches to that measurement as my stitching allowance. So the back pattern does not have a basque waistline, so it's going to stop at the waist. After doing that, I'll connect my lines and I'll go ahead and cut. If you like, you can go ahead and split the dart open, but I'm going to leave it like this and I'll cut out the opening at the back. And yeah, that is all for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to leave your questions in the comment section. I'll see you guys in the next one.